Okay, the last one of these I spoke about depression and an intro into my own mental health problems and bits and pieces. And this one I want to continue that and go into a bit more detail about obsessive compulsive disorder, which is the thing that I suffer with, and how that's different from depression. But I needed to set up the history, I think, in the last one and talk you through the story. I think that matters, even if it's not the most interesting, in which case I've tried to separate these out into a couple in case you got bored with that one. I want to jump straight into the OCD. So, obsessive compulsive disorder. It is not about turning light switches on and off, which is what I thought it was. It is not about turning Coke cans around or faced the right way in the fridge, necessarily. It's not about just cleaning your hands. It is about having something that you can't get out of your head. Right? And we've all kind of had times where that's true. Right? And you've got that voice that... Remember those gnats in the previous video? The negative automatic thoughts that, oh, I saw a small boy changing, oh, I hope my partner doesn't cheat on me, oh, I don't want to jump off that balcony. Well, now those thoughts in obsessive compulsive aren't ones that you have maybe once or twice a day. You have them hundreds of times a day, and they cause the anxiety that having those thoughts do. They start to mean something, and you have them over and over and over and over again. And that is why it's really hard to deal with, because it's not about willpower. Everybody fails given the right circumstances, given enough load. The world's strongest man, if we just went and looked at Eddie Hall's 500 ridiculous K deadlift, well, if I stick another 50K on that bar, he ain't lifting it. Maybe not at this point, he might at some point because, it's crazy, but at some point there's too much load for anyone physically. We accept that. So why don't we accept that at some point there's too much load mentally for someone too? I don't care how fucking disciplined, how hard you are mentally, you will break given the right circumstances, given enough. And that enough varies. Absolutely it varies, just in the same way that too much physical load varies for us. And we need to build our capacity to something over time mentally, just like we do physically. So let's kind of talk about it. So we have these obsessive thoughts that are constantly talking to us. And for me, I have something called relationship OCD, which is a subset of something called rumination OCD. So OCD has a few different types. It has contamination, obsessive compulsive, checking, obsessive compulsive, and then rumination, which has, and each of these has different subsets. I can only really speak with any sense of authority on my own one particularly. And so what's a compulsion? Well, a compulsion is anything that you do that temporarily alleviates the anxiety that obsessive thought causes. Okay? And this is why this has a lot to do with eating problems. And it's also why it has a lot to do with addictive behavior, because addiction most of the time has less to do, or why people become addicted, is because there's something unique, I think, about sex, drugs, food, right? It's less sexy than sex, drugs, and rock and roll. In that those things provide immediate pleasure. And if your present, if your now sucks the big one, and you can't bear it, becomes overwhelming to you, then anything that temporarily alleviates that horrendous sense of anxiety that you have, then you're going to do that, right? And so to say to someone with these issues, just stop doing that thing, well, if they stop doing that thing, then they have to experience the anxiety that they're trying to escape. And that's hard. It's really fucking hard, right? If you're going to tell me it's a willpower issue, then I'm going to show you pictures of me shredded in a mahogany-rich tan and some ridiculous Speedos, and go, if you're going to tell me I have a problem with willpower, then explain how I can do that. You're going to have a hard time telling me. Because I can also tell you, remember, that I can get out of bed till 4 in the afternoon frequently because I was busy crying, and that was important. Well, why can one person have the willpower to get shredded and to make all the sacrifices that requires, but not have the capacity to get out of bed till 4 in the afternoon? Maybe it has less to do with willpower than you think. Maybe everyone's willpower cracks given the right circumstance, so maybe we should have a conversation about circumstances, about where you're at and what your expectations of yourself should be, what you're mentally ready to deal with at this particular level in the same way that you're physically able to deal with in the gym. When we first start you out in the gym, I'm going to start you with a goblet squat. I'm not going to start you with a back squat 99.9% of the time, unless you come in and you're already a world-class squatter, in which case you're probably not working with me anyway. I want to see that basic pattern with a very moderate load. It might be 12 kilos. Over a few months, I want to see you squat 60 kilos, and so on and so forth. Mentally, I want to see the same thing. I don't go from being in bed and not unable to get up at 4 to shredded on stage overnight. That took 2 years. And if you're going to ask me which one's harder, I will laugh in your face and tell you that getting over obsessive compulsive was way harder than getting shredded. Doesn't even compare. And I've done both. Doesn't even compare. So, rumination OCD then doesn't have the physical manifestation. So if you have contamination obsessive compulsive, the anxiety causing thought that you have is that, oh my God, this surface is covered in crap, and if I don't clean it, everyone I care about, myself, my family, might get infected with the diseases that are clearly on that thing. I've got to clean it. So if I can clean it, then I feel okay that no one's going to die from these things. If I have checking OCD, if I left, I don't have hair straighteners here because I have short hair, but let's say I left the hairdryer on or some hair straighteners, if I had them, near that wildly flammable pile of clothing. Well, if I didn't go back and check that I hadn't left them right next to each other, I'd be pretty irresponsible. So if I had that thought, fuck, I did that, I've got to go back and check for my own sense of well-being that I'm not going to burn the house down and ruin and kill anyone or whatever I interpret may happen from that situation. Rumination doesn't have a physical manifestation in the same way. It's a mental set of rituals and compulsions that I would engage in that would help alleviate the sense of anxiety that I would get. So, as I said, I have relationship OCD, and I still say I have. It doesn't really affect me now, and I've learned to deal with that, and hopefully by the end of these videos, you'll see that. But I want to say I have because I'm aware that these things can come back. I'm aware how easily those neural pathways, that Hebbian law we spoke about, well, those pathways lay a bit more dormant, but they're still there. I can still default to them real quick. You don't ever forget to ride a bike, right? And that includes the bad habits that you have. They are still there a little bit. You've got to make a concerted effort for them to not be used, but they're kind of still there if you want to fall back on them a bit. Hopefully, over time, they become harder and harder to access, but they're still there. So, my fear was that my partner was going to cheat on me, that I wasn't good enough for her, that someone was going to be more attractive or smarter, better looking, whatever it happened, that kind of stuff, right? And that, of course, they would leave me because, of course, there's a better option coming around the corner at some point. And so it was a case of when that was going to happen, not if that was going to happen. And you may be listening to this and going, well, I have that thought, and you are right. Here's one of the big things for obsessive compulsive. Back in I think it was the 70s, did a study that looked at, are obsessive compulsive thoughts different in nature, different in style, than normal, quote-unquote, thoughts? So what they did was they got a group of people diagnosed with OCD and a group of normal people, again, quote-unquote, right? And they got them to write down all of the negative automatic thoughts, all the gnats that jumped into their head across the course of a day. They then jumbled up all the answers and got a team of OCD researchers to have a look at the answers, look at the thoughts that came up, and see, can you spot obsessive compulsive thoughts compared to normal thoughts? Are they different? The short answer is no. You can't. We all have these thoughts. We all have negative thoughts. We all have negative self-talk at times. So it isn't the thought itself that's the issue, it's the interpretation of that thought. It's what that thought means to you. It's that having that thought feels like it's likely to happen, and it feels like you have to do something about it, because if you don't, it will happen. One of the things that denotes an obsessive compulsive is a big inflated sense of responsibility. And by responsibility, I mean a sense that you can affect the outcome that you're worried about if you just do the right things. Okay? The problem is, with any of these things, that you can never be 100% certain that that outcome won't happen. You can never know whether your partner will fully cheat on you or not. You can get moderately certain, right? You can know the kind of person you're with. You can do all those bits and pieces. But you're never going to fully know. You don't know the future. I don't know that everyone's going to be around. I don't know that when I leave this hotel today, I'm not going to get hit by a bus, kidnapped by the Mexican cartel, eaten by a panther. Any of that shit technically could happen. I'm not worrying about it. So why was I worrying about that? Why did that thing mean something to me? Well, OCD is multifactorial in terms of how you get it and why you get it. So, yeah, my first proper girlfriend cheated on me quite a bit, and that probably had an effect. But there are lots of people who get cheated on who don't end up with obsessive compulsive. So that's not it by itself. So it's a combination, as with most things, of genetic and environmental. And it kind of doesn't necessarily matter how and when you got it. The fact is, if you've got it, you've got it, and we need to do something about it because it's ruining your life. So my compulsions that would soothe my anxiety, if, oh my God, this person's going to cheat on me, they're going to leave me, they're going to do all these things, would be one of a few things. I would either act like the most loving boyfriend in the world, because, why would you cheat on me then if I'm so fucking nice, right? Or I would do the exact opposite. I would be a little distant and standoffish, because then you would notice, and then you'd have to come and check that I'm okay, right? And by checking that I'm okay, like you could tell us something off, I would know, okay, this person does care because they're making an effort to check on me. I would be the least subtle Sherlock Holmes the world's ever seen. Like, how was your night last night? Like, okay, did you speak to anyone? What's up? And you'd try and find certainty in their answers so that you could build a picture and know, okay, they didn't cheat on me, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, they still want to be with me. There's an interesting phenomena that I learned in Obsessive Compulsive as the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire effect, and that is that when you question something that even you feel relatively certain about, you become less confident in the answer. And that can be demonstrated in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Is that your final answer? Makes everyone go, yes? Even if it's shit, is your name really Paul? Yeah. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe my birth certificate said something different. Maybe my parents lied to me about that. Was I given a different name? Maybe I was taken as a baby and swapped. What if they're not, right? You can spin out a fucking tale on stuff if you really stop to question, because how many things can I really be certain about? Ain't that many. And so the more frequently I question it, the more holes I can find, which I then need to feel certain about. There's also a really interesting one, that when you get relief from anxiety by doing something, the length of time you get that relief for before that thought comes back gets smaller each time you do it. Right? So if you're someone who has bulimic tendencies, you make yourself sick to deal with the uncomfortable feeling of feeling a bit too fat, or feeling guilty that you overate, or whatever your particular driver is that causes you to do that. And you find yourself, you make yourself sick, or you use some laxatives. Or even if you don't do that particular one, you overate one night when you're not in prep anymore, right? And then you, as a result, the next day you go, fuck, I'm going to really restrict my behavior, I'm going to do loads of exercise, I'm going to restrict my calories even further. And so you do that, and you feel a bit better. You're like, okay, I went and did something about that. But then that feeling comes back again, right? And you have, it helps your anxiety for, let's say, this long. And the anxiety comes back, and so you go, well, I did that last time and that helped, so I'm going to do that again. But this time it only helps this long, and then this long, and then this long, and then this long, and then this long. And soon you have an obsession that needs constantly relaxing by the compulsion, and it feels like the compulsion is the only thing that helps alleviate it, because otherwise you have to sit with that fucking thing that is ruining your life, that matters to you more than anything else. Okay? So the issue you have is the more frequently you engage with the compulsion, the less soothing of your anxiety you get. The less confidence you get in its outcome, the more things you can start to think of. Maybe that's not quite right. Maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need to do that. And that perpetuates a very vicious cycle that means that obsession becomes more and more and more frequent. I did not go from having a few of these thoughts a day to hundreds. And I would have on the order of 200 plus of these thoughts per day. That's where it gets overwhelming. That's why I can't get out of bed till 4 in the afternoon. These days, I might have 1 or 2 of those thoughts, which is a normal amount per day. That's fucking easy. I can piss on that, right? Bring it motherfucking on. The downside is the journey to go from a couple of hundred back to 1 or 2. It's the same in reverse as the way you went from 1 to 2 to a couple of hundred. It's slowly, and it's step by step. Because this was slowly and step by step. And that means I have to be able to sit with the anxiety that having those thoughts cause me without trying to interact with them, which will be how we get onto treating OCD shortly. Because I'm not going to go from here to there straight away. That's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. Which means I have to experience the anxiety, which is terrifying, which makes me want to engage with my compulsion more because that's the thing that fucking helps, right? But, well, the truth is, that's the exact thing I need to not do. So I fought for ages and ages and ages with that not being the solution to my issue. I wanted it to be, no, if I can just do this thing, if I just do this thing, if I just do this thing, if this just happens, if she just says that, if I can just be in the right place. And at some point when you hit rock bottom for long enough, you come to a realization that if reality isn't changing, then I have to change. And that's fucking hard. And I actually don't know that any of us change before we hit that point of, fuck, okay, the onus is on me. I'm the one who has to change. I don't know that we do. So that then leads on to how it gets better. And this comes down to something we call theory A versus theory B. So theory A is that if the thing that you are worried about, the obsession in your head is likely to happen, then everything that you do makes sense from that point. If the table I'm sat at is covered in a green gunk that's moving and I eat from it, I'm being a fucking idiot, right? Because, well, that's weird, right? That may well kill me. I don't know what the fuck that is. If I did leave a hairdryer or hair straighteners near some highly flammable fluids in a baby, well, I should fucking go back and check it, because that's being retarded too. If, however, the thing that I'm worried about is no more or less likely to happen than anything else, theory B, then the actions that I do don't make sense. They don't actually help. They perpetuate the cycle. Yeah, for the reason that we just kind of mentioned. So the solution to theory B cannot be the actions that would normally take place in theory A, in normal behavior to an odd circumstance. Because that thing isn't more or less likely to happen. So I don't need to engage in those actions. And by engaging in those actions, I decrease my confidence in the outcome of doing those actions, meaning my anxiety comes back a bit faster, and I decrease the confidence that I have within them. Well, fuck, man, right? That means I've got to go back to my Hebbian law understanding, and I've got to try and rewire a new pathway. But while I rewire a new pathway, I'm going to keep defaulting to the old one, especially if I'm having these hundreds of times a day. And that means while I keep consciously trying to do this, and this is exhausting emotionally and physically, to be honest with you, I'm going to have to keep experiencing shit, and I'm going to have to keep going, okay, fuck, stop. Because the difference between CBT for OCD, fun bunch of acronyms, is whereas standard CBT for depression and other disorders encourages you to argue with that thought, it encourages you to question it, it encourages you to do something with it. OCD wants you to do the exact fucking opposite, right? Because by engaging with it, you're saying that it has some meaning, that it needs to be told no or yes, and there wasn't just one of those odd things that jump in your head and you're like, all right, fine, and then you can kind of move on with. So the solution to it lies in noticing a thought. This is really common with mindfulness. Mindfulness and some of this stuff annoys me slightly in that too many people take it as being constantly positive. Nah, that's not what it means, right? Constantly positive is just as stupid as constantly negative. The human spectrum, the human experience includes feeling shit. It includes feeling worried, it includes feeling fucking awesome, it includes having a giant orgasm every now and again. It also includes people dying. It includes all of these, and that is the wonderful breadth and depth and brevity of human experience. You can't pick and choose just certain ones. So to never have an anxiety-inducing thought, for me to never have to think my partner is going to cheat me, isn't going to happen, because as we've established, everyone has those thoughts. So the solution must lie in being able to experience them without having them mean much to me, without acting upon them. Okay? And so when they jump in my head, as surely they will, I have to just go, okay, you're thinking that. Let's get back to whatever I'm trying to focus on, whatever I'm trying to do right now. which might be recording this video, which could jump in my head during the course of this video. Hey, what if... Okay, all right, let's get back to what I'm focusing on. Let's try and bring my attention back to the present. Because we can almost define depression and anxiety issues as robbing you of your ability to live in the present. Okay, they make you either ruminate over the past or worry about the future, and you cease to have a now as a result. And that's a big shame. So we want to bring our ability back to, can we experience a now that's okay? Can I enjoy the now? And if I can't, then I've got a problem. That doesn't mean to say that certain shit doesn't happen that robs you of your ability every now and again. If you do have a grievance, something bad happens to you, then of course that's normal for you to go through that. That, truthfully, is one of the hardest parts I found about coming back to a normal life, quote unquote, after having OCD, is if bad things happen in relationships that I'm in, how do I know whether I'm having a normal reaction or an obsessive compulsive reaction? And interestingly, if I try to find certainty, again, in an inherently uncertain issue, that's where I get back to OCD. So if I have those thoughts even in this one, well, I have to try and let them go too. There's no clear, neat, divine line. Remember the nuance that we said near the start of this, the billions and billions and billions of interconnected neurons? Well, that means there's nuance. That means there's subtlety at play behind these mechanisms, and I have to be okay with that. If you're looking for a quick, this is the answer, or this is the fix, and you'll look for that because that's human nature. I looked for it for months and months, best part of a year. It took me to go from diagnosis to being better, quote unquote. And I looked for every quick fix, not necessarily quick fix, but every just thing that, oh, if I just do that, that'll be better. If I just do that, that'll be better. If I just do that, that'll be better, that I could try and find along the way. And it wasn't until I hit that rock bottom, it wasn't until I had to change because reality wasn't changing, that I started to understand the nuance behind it and be okay with that and that process. And it's a process, and it will take you time. You've got to try not to beat yourself up too much while you get it wrong, because of course you're going to get it wrong. If you're having hundreds of those thoughts per day, then of course it's not going to be perfect overnight, because of course perfect doesn't exist. So when you slip up, as you assuredly will, I've said assuredly a couple of times in this video, and I've said that word that many times, then we've just got to try and get back on track. And that's a truism of the gym too. Just got to get back on track. When I start to make compensatory behavior, when I start to try and do weird things because of the mistake that I made, most of the time that's the mistake caused me anxiety, and that anxiety started causing these things that made me feel a bit better. But that's a very dangerous cycle to get yourself in the habit of. Be wary of it, okay? And when you slip up, well, you don't need to do anything differently. You just got to try and get back on track. And when you catch yourself doing it wrong again, you just remind yourself, okay, let's just get back to letting it go, and letting it go, and letting it go, to quote Froze. And that doesn't mean I succeed at that every time. But when I don't succeed, I know that my job is to get back to doing what I just need to do, which is letting it go. It doesn't mean I need to berate myself. Does that mean every now and again that thought jumps in my head? Yeah, of course it does. Of course I go, fuck's sake, you dick, doing it again, right? I also know, though, that, well, if I keep going, why the fuck did you do that? I keep questioning that instead of just having that thought. I don't need to question that thought. I don't need to delve deeper into that thought. It happened. I told myself I was a twat. Exploring why I'm a twat any further, it's not going to change anything. So I go back to just letting it go and letting it go. And eventually, I also took I changed medication during this time to fluoxetine. And that was great. I much preferred fluoxetine. But eventually, over a long time, went from a couple of hundred thoughts to a normal one or two. And that was the hardest journey I think I've ever done in my life. And if you have to go through anything kind of like that, whether it's an eating disorder, whether it's addictive behavior that share very similar mechanisms between these things. There's even, interestingly, some overlap between some of the pain science and cognitive behavioral approaches that seem to have some value. So that's interesting. And I think I can see how that works with the neuromatrix of that. That's a whole other thing. Random tangential thought just came out of my face, kind of about that one. There's no great fix I can give you at the end of this video. But I wanted to talk about it because it's true for me. It's part of my experience. It's made me a way better coach, I think. Because I know it's not about sucking it up. I know what the brain does and can do. I've experienced it. I've been there. I've seen that pit of despair. And I've gradually managed to get out the other side. How did I do that? I had people around me who I relied on a lot. I would not have got through it without them. I didn't plan on necessarily getting emotional. I'll leave that in because I think it's important. But years later, this shit still matters, you know? And I'm grateful in a way that I really struggle to say this on his face. Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to break down. And I don't always like doing that. But I wouldn't have got through it without people around me. I wouldn't have got through it without professional help. Get professional help. Go and see a doctor. I know it's scary. I know it's fucking awful, but I swear to God, there are people that are trained to do this, that are better at it than me, that are better at it than you, and there is fucking no shame in going and doing that. The biggest shame is that your ego is so big and so scared and so vulnerable that it will let you get to the point that you'd rather die than admit that. Fuck that. Fuck that. So, get help. Get people around you and be honest with them. They care. They'll be there. They'll have a hard time with it too. Mental health is hard on the people around you. Go and read the Black Dog series and Caring for a Black Dog series. They're great books. There's even a couple of great YouTube videos on it. Ooh, I'm emotional here. Try and steady yourself inside for the journey, because it's going to be a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. Whatever you're doing. It's not going to be easy. I'm not going to say it'll be easy. It'll be the opposite of fucking easy. You're going to doubt yourself every step of the way. Rely on people when you can. Keep trying to hold on to that sense that maybe it can be better, maybe it can be better, maybe it can be better. Because it can. Because it has for other people. Because it has for me. And there's no reason why that couldn't be you. You don't know whether that'll be you. There are some people who don't get better. That's a truth. That's a truism too. But you don't know whether you're going to be the good one or the bad one. You can't know that. So siding with either one makes no fucking sense. So embrace the journey. The journey is the thing that matters. The only way you get to be better or not is by doing the process. That also applies to weight loss and everything else you can imagine too in life. Process first. If you can do that, steady yourself, accept that it's going to be a long time, have good people around you, get professional help. Try not to beat yourself up too much when you fuck up, because you will. But then eventually, you can get to a better place. That's the fucking point. Life has so many great things. There's a reason I wanted to film this while I was away, rather than just at home, because life could be worse for me right now. If I turn this around, I think that and over there is cool. I'm in Costa Rica. I got to go to Hawaii this year. But a couple of years ago, I couldn't get myself to do any work. I couldn't get out of bed. There was no value in my life. I couldn't help you guys. I couldn't help clients because I couldn't help me. And if I can't do that, then everything else is reliant on it. I've got to get that in place first. You've got to get that in place first. You have to take care of yourself first and know what that means. And mental health, when it's at its worst, robs you of your ability to live a life that has these experiences that make it worth fucking living. Visiting places, hanging out with the people you care about, making memories, and doing shit that means something to you. Because mental health at its worst means nothing means anything to you. That shit. I have a very finite time here, and I want to enjoy every moment that I can. Doesn't mean I'll enjoy every moment. That's not life too. But I don't want to have any worse ones than I need to have. And that comes down to rewiring some neural networks, taking my time together, prioritizing my mental health, understanding yourself. Once that's in place, well, then you'll be surprised the amount of things that start to come out when you're just interested in stuff. Then go and chase the things that you're interested in, that you're curious about, that you feel passionate about. Passion, to quote Dan John, really the root means to suffer. And so to suffer for love is the way he describes that. To suffer in the pursuit of something you care about is to be passionate about something. It doesn't mean that it's great the whole time. It almost means that it does suck at times, and you get through that, and that journey through getting through something is to have passion for something. So I can say that I have passion for life because I've seen the shit bits. And I'm sure some of you guys get that too. I think, generally speaking, the most empathetic and kind-hearted people I have come across have seen bad times. And that's a subjective term, of course it is. I'm not comparing what I went through to a refugee going through stuff. It's not the same. But it also isn't the same in reverse. It doesn't diminish my situation just because it didn't have this great sense of trauma and tragedy to it because of external events necessarily. You can't compare one to the other. It does not diminish or demean the things that I went through because they didn't happen in the third world. And it doesn't diminish or demean what someone in the third world went through simply because of what sounds like a first world problem. But look, if a first world problem can cause people to kill themselves, let's not call it a first world problem. Let's not demean that. It's unfair to the people who suffer through it. It's real. That's all that really matters. And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way forever. If you can understand how it manifests and what you have to do to get out the other side of it. I think I'll leave that there. It's been an interesting video. Not gonna lie, I'm tempted to cut out the upset bit, but I'm not gonna. I think it's important it's important that I'm fucking honest about everything. I can't edit these things out. If I'm gonna talk about this, I'll fucking talk about it. And everything that means, not just the bits I want you to see. Social media is far too full of people just having happy conversations and pretend things and sticking up memes that say, just always look on the bright side, or whatever wank-ass fucking phrase that makes no fucking sense, doesn't help dick shit, right? No, let's have real conversations. And yeah, I want to look for the good in things, but I can only do that by acknowledging the shit too, and talking about how we get through that. So, it's quite a lot of personal stuff. Maybe it helps you, maybe it doesn't, maybe it allows you to relate, and I hope that is true. And if that is the case, and you just want to fire a message quietly on an email, or just a private Facebook message, please do. I know what it's like to feel, and it amazes me when I've spoken to people in my own private life about this, the amount of people who open up and tell me stuff simply because I've done this. And that makes me think that it matters that I do this. That I don't want other people to suffer in the same way that I did. And maybe by helping them, that helps me a bit. And so maybe that's selfish too. Maybe that's true. But I'd also like to think some of it's because I don't want you guys, whoever you are, to feel that way. It's such a waste, and it doesn't have to be. I firmly believe it don't have to be that way. So please, don't take that as a just superfluous, nothing throwaway phrase. I 100% mean it. Please do reach out if you need to.